you will see different situations here. So I say, very welcome, Reb Wheel. Please introduce yourself and just go on.
Thank you so much, Lars. I really appreciate the introduction. And thank you, everyone, for spending your evening, your Thursday evening here. I apologize for my lack of Swedish. As of a few minutes ago, I have 2 words so far in Swedish. One is tack, and the other is skål. So I think they're quite important words, but I apologize for the rest of this presentation being in English. I'll share a presentation, a PowerPoint presentation with you. There will be some interaction. I'm happy to take questions. I understand that Lars is going to be monitoring the chat, and there are a couple of exercises through the presentation because I want you to get something valuable to take away from the end of this evening. So I'll share the presentation. There we are. And I'll just check that everybody, there we are, everybody can see that presentation. I'm sure that Lars or Dennis will tell me if it's not clear. So as Lars introduced, my name is Reb Wheel and my company is Reveal Solutions. I am originally from the UK, but I've lived now for a couple of years in France, southwest France. By career, I was a former human resources director, and at the same time, I became aware of coaching about 28 years ago. So I'm still a practicing and qualified coach and coach supervisor. I'm also an occupational psychologist, a former psychotherapist, and I'm also, for those of you who are aware of NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, I'm an NLP master trainer for Inulpta. So that's my background. For the past 10 years, since 2013, when I first came across mBraining, or mBIT, which is what I'm going to be sharing with you this evening, I have stopped doing psychotherapy, and pretty much now my practice is about 85 to 90% mBraining or mBIT. And that is because it is simply the most powerful, profound, gentle, empowering modality that I've come across. Now, it's a real treat for me to be talking with all of you and sharing this with you, because I know that as ICF members, and those of you, thank you for joining, who aren't ICF members as well, you are all already skilled. You have multiple modalities, skill sets, backgrounds that you bring to your coaching with your clients. So I hope to share with you this evening something that is of practical use to you. And potentially, if you're more interested, we can talk afterwards about how you may deal with that. So this is the first webinar in Sweden for ICF Sweden about mBraining and mBIT. Having said that, I have been lucky enough to train ICF coaches in Canada, the US, Greece, Pakistan, Ireland, South Africa, France, Egypt, Israel, and the UK in mBraining. So there are quite a lot of your colleagues in other countries who are really taking this on board and picking up the gauntlet. But my outcomes for this particular session with you are so that by the end you will know a bit about mBraining and mBIT, understand how mBraining can complement your existing skill set. The 2 founders of the field were very keen that nobody mistook the message for forget what you already know and do exquisitely, here's mBraining, that we combine it in a way that is uniquely ours, that we bring our own flavor using mBraining with other aspects of your background to our clients in a way that is deeply authentic. I would like you to experience a brief taste of mBIT. As I said, there are 2 exercises, and the last one of those is really to have a small takeaway that you can use for yourself after this evening, and also potentially with your coaching clients if you find it valuable and helpful in that regard. So, first of all, a little bit about mBIT and mBraining, and those 2 terms that I've used so far. This is the book. So people who come on the 4-day course that Lars mentioned get a copy of this book. It was published in 2012 by the 2 gentlemen at the bottom, Marvin Oka, who is also an NLP master trainer. He's one of the co-founders of INOLPTA, the International NLP Trainers Association, and Grant Suzalu, who sadly passed in 2019. However, he achieved a huge amount and left a really incredible and formidable legacy in the shape of mBraining. And I particularly love the subtitle of the book, which is Using Your Multiple Brains to Do Cool Stuff. Now, if you were to ask most of your coaches and colleagues and clients to point to their brain, I have a feeling that many of them would probably point to the squidgy piece inside their skull. In other words, they would point to their head brain, and that's pretty normal. That's understandable because for centuries we've been told that that is our only brain. However, neuroscientists disagree. They have a certain number of criteria that define what a brain should be. And from the fields of neurocardiology, so the field that describes our heart as a brain, and neurogastroenterology, the field of neuroscience that defines our gut, a brain. They actually deem that we have more than one brain or intelligence. And specifically in this book and in this particular evening, I'll be talking about how our head, our heart, and our gut are each centers of intelligence, and not in a metaphorical way, not just symbolically or in a way that is an analogy. Actually, in a neuroscientific, very accurate way, these meet the criteria, the multiple criteria, to be described as brains by neuroscientists. Now, I'm not a neuroscientist. Marvin and Grant weren't neuroscientists, although Grant did eat, sleep, and breathe neuroscience very much. However, I'm not going to contradict a neuroscientist who is qualified, who wants to describe these as brains. So I find that evidence pretty compelling. Now, you've heard me use 2 terms so far, mBraining, which is the title of the book, and mBIT. And just to clarify what those 2 terms are, how they are linked and different, mBraining is the process that we all use in terms of how we're currently using our multiple brains. So I might say to one of my coachees, one of my clients, do some mBraining on that. In other words, check in with your head, your heart, and your gut in a specific way that I'll share with them. And notice the ing, it's ongoing. It's not just a thing that is static in time. So we are verbs as humans, we are processes, we're never static or still. So that is mBraining. It's the natural process that is happening in any case, whether that's within our conscious awareness or outside our conscious awareness. So how is mBIT different? mBIT stands for multiple brain integration techniques, not to be confused with Myers-Briggs for those of you that are familiar with MBTI. So the techniques that we teach on the 4-day coach certification are specific ways that we can work with clients in order to help them to surface their own wisdom, to help them align and, as Lars said, harmonize all of their brains. Because this isn't a model of parts. They were never designed to be used separately. They were always designed in humans to work much better together in harmony. So if we take account of all of them in specific ways and use that process of alignment, then actually it tends to work out much better for humans. So why is mBIT representing quite a breakthrough in the coaching world? Why is it fast becoming very interesting to existing coaches and also as a route into coaching other people? So, a few reasons. Firstly, if we only focus on our clients' minds and their thinking by asking cognitive or cerebral questions, then the solutions may be hypothetical or aspirational. Even if we don't ask a hypothetical question, people, when they get up into their heads, get quite creative and imaginative. And sometimes that doesn't actually match their lived experience or their reality. So, what we need to do is help them achieve a sustainable change even after they've ended their coaching relationship with us, so that they will be empowered on balance to go and live their lives in a much more effective, sustainable, and wise way. And also, despite the many typologies, and as I mentioned, I'm an occupational psychologist by trade, so I'm familiar with a number of psychometric instruments, as I'm sure many of you are, whether it be Myers-Briggs, Insights, DISC, FIRO-B, Neo-PIR, and there's a whole host of others. People, of course, are unique. None of our coachees are the same, even two who come from the same place or do the same job role. So the more closely we can meet them in their model of the world, the more we can stay clean and out of their model of the world and enable them to surface their own wisdom, the more satisfactory that's going to be for them. And of course, the more beneficial it is for them, the more they're going to spread the word that, wow, this coach is phenomenal. They've helped me change my life in a way that is a bit like crossing the Rubicon. You can't unknow that which you now know. And finally, we all live undeniably, the past few years have really taught us that, in a world that is changing more rapidly and at a greater volume and rate than ever before. So our clients need more than ever before to find their own innate wisdom. I think we can all agree that if you put something into any search engine, you get tens of thousands of responses within a nanosecond. And with the coming of AI, and of course, we're informed that AI is feeding its way into the coaching world, it's upon us to find ways of empowering our clients to find their own human wisdom that works for them in their world, as I mentioned, sustainably. So it's really about empowerment. And this is where neuroscience, as Lars said, is validating ancient wisdom practices. mBIT in and of itself isn't made of neuroscience. However, the neuroscience that is incorporated into it is actually validating stuff that as humans is so recognizable to us that we sense is deeply the way we're made. So I hope to uncover more of that over the next hour or hour and a quarter for you. So I'm curious, have you ever had a client who was really capable of identifying lots of options? Perhaps they come up with all sorts of solutions, but they didn't really feel very deeply motivated by any of them. There was a bit of a meh sort of response. Or perhaps they knew all the facts. Perhaps they could even populate an Excel spreadsheet. Maybe they'd done Kurt Lewin's force field analysis. They had all of the pros, all of the cons. Maybe they'd even ranked them in order of importance, but they still just didn't care that much. Or maybe Conversely, they passionately cared about something, but they lacked real clarity about, where do I start? What does a good job look like? They just really hadn't got those ideas. Maybe they had lots of energy. They could muster up the motivation. They were raring to go, but they were unsure how to prioritize, where to start, what was most important, what came next, what was the last step. Or maybe you've experienced a client who became spontaneously emotional. Maybe they even apologized for the emotion and then tried to suppress the emotion, push it back down because they didn't deem it appropriate or helpful. And as I said, maybe apologized for it. So, from an mBIT perspective, we would probably say that the chances are their multiple brains were out of balance. And our job as mBIT coaches is helping them to get those into alignment so that they're actually able to both commit to something emotionally, energetically, passionately, also rationally, and also take action upon it. Because without each of those three, then it's going to be incomplete. And the chances are it's probably not going to work for them. The key thing is our clients aren't broken. It's just that life has a habit of getting our multiple brains out of balance until we find out how to communicate with them, how to align them, and therefore how to bring them back into balance. And that's really the life-changing piece that we share with clients. Now, this isn't new. This wasn't invented in 2012 when the book was published. Actually, there are plenty of other authors or writers or coaches who are talking about the same thing. For example, I mentioned the field of neurogastroenterology. Professor Michael Gershon was the foremost researcher in that field. And when he was talking about what he described as the second brain or our gut brain, he was talking about everywhere in between the inside of our lips, including our throat, our esophagus, all the way down all of our internal organs, including our lungs, our liver, our kidneys, our pancreas, our spleen, all of our stomach, and our large and small intestine, all the way through to the anus. So he was really talking about that not only is that convenient plumbing for doing a physiological job, but it is also a seat of wisdom in and of its own right. Also, a fantastic book by a German scientist, Dr. Julia Enders. There's also an excellent TED talk. If you're interested, you can go on YouTube and Google Julia Enders and put in gut as the search term. She talks about how, although our microbiome in and of itself is not our gut brain, it's absolutely essential for helping our gut brain sustain life in humans. So if it weren't for those friendly bacteria that we feed ourselves, then actually we wouldn't be alive, much less taking wise decisions. But they're not the only ones. So there are also authors across the past 20 years talking about leading from the heart, the brain in our gut, mind-gut connection, a book specifically on leadership called Head, Heart and Guts, How the World's Best Companies Develop Complete Leaders by David Dotlich and his colleagues. One of my favorites, Bugs, Bowels and Behavior, really just because of the title. It amuses me. But what all of these authors are saying is actually, if we get out of just our heads and we take account of the wisdom that arises from our heart and our gut, then we're likely to make much better decisions. And it turns out this isn't just in coaching. It's in a whole host of fields now. There's evidence arising in the fields of leadership, in health and healthcare, in academia, in education, in fields as disparate as massage and dog training. So really a whole host of fields are now realizing that if we take the wisdom from our whole body, our whole system, rather than just our head, which is quite a Victorian concept that we just pay attention to the head brain, then actually we make much better decisions, more sustainable decisions, decisions that sit better with us, that last the test of time, and that feel better. So they have the satisfaction factor as well. So, what is embraining based on? So, it's based on a number of different fields. It's quite eclectic. So, I mentioned the fields of neuroscience. Up until approximately 25 years ago, neuroscience was really confined to just the central nervous system. In other words, the head and the nerves running down the spine. And of course, they're important. However, the fields of neurocardiology, how our heart is a brain, and neurogastroenterology, how our gut is also a brain, particularly feed into the field of embraining. Indeed, Grant, when he was spending 6 years researching this particular field before publishing the book, he read, digested, and cross-referenced more than 3,000 scientific research papers. And in fact, they are all available. They're all open source, so that anybody who's interested in embraining can actually read the Excel spreadsheet and access every single one of those scientific research papers. And they're searchable according to topic and application as well. Also drawing evidence and information from the field of neurolinguistics. Now, as experienced coaches, this is part and parcel of your skill set. You listen to the language your clients use, the way they use language, what that might signify in terms of a limiting belief that they may hold, an assumption that they've made. I know some of you may well be NLP trained, whether practitioner, master practitioner, trainer, and therefore you'll be aware that people don't use language by accident. They often use language other than consciously. However, it's never by accident. It usually portrays their internal milieu or model of the world. Also, some of the background to embraining is based on cognitive mapping. So the field of cognitive science from the use of metaphor, for example, actually has been mapped over to using fMRI scanners and recognizing that when people do use certain phrases, when people use certain metaphors, actually the neural circuitry in their central nervous system that is associated with their experience of those real life symbols or occurrences actually lights up as if they were experiencing it again now. So we can actually see that those mirror neurons are working, whether we are really experiencing or whether our clients are actually using that to describe an experience. And also from behavioral modeling. So both Grant and Marvin are or were behavioral modelers in spirit. In other words, they would look for exemplars, people who make really helpful decisions, decisions they're confident about, comfortable with, and that serve them well. What might be described as wise decisions. Decisions that come from their highest expressions, the highest expression of the heart, the head, and the gut, and that stand the test of time as well. So, really, the science of what works. And also, embraining has a lot of correlation with, you heard me use the term ancient wisdom, so esoteric studies. I know that some of you will be familiar with meditation or yoga, or maybe Reiki, or you may have studied the Enneagram. many of these have so many overlays. And of course, it's no surprise because these things have evolved alongside human culture, human consciousness over the past few millennia. And actually, it's unsurprising that when people come to embraining and mBIT, one of the most common phrases that we hear them say is, "This is brand new to my consciousness." But at the same time, it doesn't feel new. It feels so familiar, so natural. And that's really one of the reasons why it feels so successful, that it is taking off, because people can relate to it instantly, even if they haven't known the neuroscience as a background. So I think I've certainly been doing enough talking so far. It's time for an exercise. So what I'm going to invite you to do, I know that Dennis, or maybe Lars, will set up the breakout rooms in just a moment. And I'd invite you to go into breakout rooms and in your small groups to discuss, and by all means in English or in Swedish. I'm taking for granted that you all speak Swedish, so do feel free to speak in your own language in the breakout rooms. Just identify as many sayings, as many phrases that either your coachees may use or you use in society generally. It could be formal things, it could be slang. Any sentences or phrases that relate to the head, or that relate to the heart, or relate to the gut. And I'll give you a few examples from English. So someone might say, "Oh, this problem's doing my head in." Or they might say in English, "He wears his heart on his sleeve." Or, "Oh, this meeting, it's boring. I've had a gutful today." So there's a few examples in English. Feel free to come up with as many as you can in each category. Make sure in your group you're coming up with head, heart, and gut, as many as you can. I'm not saying it's a competition, but maybe if it were. And I think let's make it about 10 minutes. That gives you 3 minutes for each of those three, plus an extra minute for comfort. And then we'll come back and do a plenary debrief, and you can tell me all of the phrases that you've come up with. And I might have a subsequent question after you've done that. So hopefully everyone understands what I'm asking you to do. Have a bit of fun with this. Come up with some outrageous ones, maybe some slightly funny ones as well, and then we'll come back afterwards. So enjoy your time in the breakout rooms. 10 minutes starts now. Really curious. I'm really curious in terms of what were some of the things that the phrases that came up of, if we take each of the brains in turn. And I may need you, who am I kidding? I will need you to translate perhaps, please, but feel free to say them out loud in Swedish so that everybody from other groups understands what your group came up with. What about some head phrases from Swedish, please?
It's empty. Det är tomt I huvudet.
Talking to the gut.
No, det är tomt I huvudet.
It's
empty.
my head is empty.
Yeah.
Lovely. Yeah, well, not lovely, but but a really good example. Yes, thanks so much indeed. Lovely. Another one.
Fjärilar I magen.
Butterflies in your stomach.
Yeah, butterflies.
Fantastic. Butterflies in your stomach. So we've got a gut one. Lovely. Any more head ones?
It's all in your head.
It's all in your head. Yeah. How many of us have actually been told that in the past? I know I have. Yep.
I've got my head in the clouds.
Oh, yes, head in the clouds. Again, I'm sure that's very recognizable. Many people would have had people say that to them. Good, thank you. What else?
I've got my head under the arm.
My head under my arm. Yes, I think sometimes people are told their head is somewhere else as well. Yeah, we've heard plenty of those. Good. Any more head ones?
Det ger mig
Well, in
huvudbry.
my, how to translate that?
What gives me...
Repetera.
Det ger mig huvudbry. So it sort of causes me sort of like a
Headache.
cognitive headache.
Yeah.
Cognitive headache.
Lots to
Puzzles
think
my
about.
head. Puzzles my head.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's on my nerves.
It's getting on my nerves. Fantastic.
Yeah.
And
Had
any
one
more?
in my group that said, because you worked with engineers, and they said this is the main thing, but this is the head thing, as they would say in Swedish.
Yeah.
Head
Yeah.
thing, but it
Head
means the
thing,
main
yeah.
thing. And they're up here, only there.
Yeah, you're so right. And I shared that experience of, I work quite a lot with groups of engineers and also groups of academics. And I'm just saying that they may have something in common. So yeah, absolutely. When they're really just, what we say, it's head stuff. So if you think about, many of you will either do consulting with organizations, or you may work within organizations, or you may have previously worked in organizations. What do we call the main office where all of the important central people?
Yeah, the head office.
Yeah, the head office.
Yeah.
Exactly so.
Significant. Says
Isn't
a
it?
lot. Yeah.
When we talk about the dining room table or the boardroom table, or the important person in a family, what do we tend to call them?
Head
Head
of the family.
The head of the family. Yeah, so absolutely. Our culture, our society has been telling us for at least 150 years that this is the important bit. This is the sexy piece that we should be caring about. And for sure, it's really important, but it's not the only show in town. So yeah, you came up with some fantastic head examples. Thank you very much. We'll come back to that maybe in just a couple of minutes. What about some of the heart ones that your groups came up with?
It's a question of the heart.
It's a question of the heart. Yeah, lovely. Thank you. What else?
It feels good.
Yeah, it does. It feels good. And we notice that's not a head thing, right? That's definitely round here. So it feels good. I'm almost going to go into a song. Na 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 na. Thank you. Yeah, what else?
Hjärtskärande. That's like it's
Heartbreak.
cutting into my heart. Heartbreak, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Cutting into my heart.
Heartbreak. It's cutting into my heart. Notice what a palpable feeling that is that describes that particular emotion. Yeah, thank you. What else?
Well, we had opposite of this head thing. It was it's a question of the heart.
Yeah, it's a question of the heart.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very different, isn't it, to a question of the head? We're
Yeah.
talking about totally different things. Fantastic. Good. What else? Some other groups.
My sweetheart.
Oh, I'm sure you're not talking about me, but yes, we do talk about sweetheart, don't we? The people that we care about, who are dear to us. Yeah.
We also talked about visual language, that you put your hand on your heart when you talk something that matters for you.
Exactly, where it really matters for you. And I know that you will probably have, looking back, seen your clients doing this when you ask them about what's important or what matters, their hand with unconscious. Exactly, Cecil Kristen is just showing us there. Your hand goes straight to your chest, doesn't it? I find this really, really interesting because we don't have to teach people to do this, do we? They do it naturally. This is how human intelligences, as it turns out, are arranged. They know intuitively that their heart is responsible for certain things. I'm picking up Jan's comment about put your hand on your heart. This is where I could lapse into song. You know, St. Kylie of Minogue, put your hand on your heart and tell me it's all over. Exactly, where she's trying to get someone to tell the truth. Thank you. Latifa.
Yeah, we have something we say, finns det hjärterum, finns det stjärterum. And it means that if there is space in the heart, there'll be space for the butt.
Oh, fantastic. I love that. Thank you so much. Yeah. I love hearing ones from different languages around the world. This is great. A few more heart ones.
Heartwarming.
Oh, heartwarming. Fantastic. And we all get a felt sense of what that means. Yeah.
Hjärtans hjärna. And that is something like, I really would like to do that from my
Again.
heart.
Yeah, so you would have experienced your coaches, hopefully, saying, you know, I really want that straight from my heart. Another song. You notice how many popular music song titles are coming from the heart area, as if by accident, and not at all. All the things about heartbreak and straight from the heart and what matters to the heart. Fantastic. So you've given me loads of excellent heart phrases. Let's get gutsy. Let's get to some of these gut ones like Elizabeth started us off earlier on.
Gut feeling is the same in Swedish as in English.
Fantastic. So
Yeah.
I've got a gut feeling about this. Great. Yeah.
You know, this with the nerves, I have my nerves outside my, body. Then we were discussing if that was, going related to gut or to the heart.
Fantastic. Honest answer is, depending on how your coachee says it, it could be either. In English, if a client says, I sense that, well, there's three ways you could take that. They could say, yes, that makes sense. You're getting a sense of where that one comes from. Yes, that makes sense. Of course, it's head. But if someone says, I sense that I want to, get a feeling that might be more from the heart. Whereas if they say, I'm sensing that, it's a bit more gutty, isn't it? So it could be either really well identified and well pointed out. Thank you. Other gut ones.
We have magkänsla. It's a stomach feeling. I
Got
have
a
a
stomach
stomach
gut
feeling
feeling.
that I like
Yeah.
to order.
Yeah, fantastic. So quite specific within the gut, which is
Yeah.
all the way from the mouth all the way through to the anus, but it's specific in this one to the stomach. Lovely. Thank you.
Klump i magen. There is something clumsy or thick.
A nut in my gut, I think it is.
A nut in my gut. Thank you.
I've got a nut in my gut. Yeah. Yeah. So a bit like the butterflies that Elizabeth said earlier on. But if someone has butterflies in their stomach, it's not an unpleasant feeling. It's almost anticipation. Whereas if someone has a knot in their gut, that's slightly less pleasant and a bit more. Notice I'm getting less verbal as I'm going further down to the gut. There's more facial expressions and gestures. Yeah, good. Other gut ones.
I would like to just add that coaching like a blind person,
Yes.
a blind business leader or so forth, from my experience and my research, they all tend to say, like, I need to borrow your eyes in order to do this and do that and not behave like a monkey. It's what it's more or less coming to. But they use different, obviously the contexts differ, but that thing of borrowing your eyes, they all have, in order to behave on par with their sighted peers. Because they wish not to behave like as if they are differently abled. And once they understand that all of us are differently abled, they seem to relax and have much less anxiety.
What a beautiful example that is. And actually, there is medical evidence that does demonstrate what you're saying, that when someone has either one sense or one physical ability that is lost or is, for whatever reason, compromised, then actually other abilities or senses are neurologically heightened, whether through contrast or through extra use. So, for example, the classic would be someone who has a visual different ability. Often their hearing is really heightened, or their ability to differentiate from a kinesthetic sense, the ability to differentiate temperature or tactile, for example, using Braille or some such. Really great example. Thank you.
But if they're blind deaf, then the other senses that's left of the primary senses has to be sort of supported by secondary senses. And in research, it shows that we might have up to 47 senses.
Indeed.
Secondary. So, yeah, but it's all about the behavior coming from the gut.
Behavior is one of the things that comes from the gut, absolutely. One of the ways gut intelligence can surface. And picking up your piece around the number of intelligences we have, or the number of senses we have, apologies. Grant Suzalu, one of the developers of the field, had a phrase that he used to use because he was very, very fond of science, particularly neuroscience, but all sciences. He had, I think, 6 degrees at last count of various different types in various fields. And he used to say, science stumbles its way to the truth. In other words, science is really now proving and evidencing and discovering that which as humans at certain level for millennia we have already known. But it's nice in our current social milieu to have it proven, because many of the organizations or leaders or clinicians or academics that we may work with are actually reassured by having evidence and having a neuroscientific basis. And that's one of the things that I'm so grateful for in mBIT and mBraining, that we have that clear evidence base. It's incredibly compelling. So you mentioned some fantastic gut phrases and sentences. There are a few additional ones in English that come from outside the stomach. So people might say things like, the sweet taste of success, or it's a delicious opportunity, or I've got a bitter taste in my mouth, or no, that sticks in my throat, or having to deal with that person makes me feel a little bit sick in the stomach. Or there are so many more besides, and I'm sure there are many informal ones. Gut is usually where some of the swear words come in. So if you've heard your client who's very well spoken and polite suddenly swearing, that's a clue to you as an experienced coach. I think they might be speaking from their gut right now. You've now got a set of different lenses. So I'm going to start sharing the recording again, and what I'm going to ask, sorry, not the recording, the presentation, and I'm going to ask you about the processes that you're identifying in the groups of phrases. So, for example, let's go back. There you go. So what is each brain designed to do? Now, if you think about the phrases your groups came up with that relate to the head, the sayings in Swedish that relate to the head, what are some of the processes that they're describing? What's the job or jobs that the head brain is doing? Just unmute yourself and share out loud.
Analysis.
Analysis, fantastic. Exactly. Our head brain, central nervous system, is a supercomputer. It absolutely carries out analysis, which, to be fair, IT and AI is only just now beginning to match. And even then, not quite the complexity in the same way, not as nuanced. So analysis is one of the jobs that the head brain does. Excellent, thank you. What else does the head brain do?
Strategy.
Rationalize.
It strategies and it rationalizes, exactly. So it forms a strategy. In other words, it's able to project out into the future and identify, if we do this, then what will happen? If we do this, what will happen and what will be necessary to enable that to happen? So it's able to strategize. It rationalizes. In other words, it doesn't take anything personally. It's objective. I think somebody earlier on talked about cognitive processing. So it does all of those things. And is there anything else that the head does?
Remember.
It remembers. Fantastic. Thank you. And somebody else mentioned something I didn't quite catch.
Synthesis.
Synthesis, exactly so. All of these are what we call prime functions or core jobs of the head brain. In fact, there are 3 prime functions. So the main jobs, if you like, of the head brain are perceiving. It's no accident that the 5 main senses are primarily based around the head. So, for example, the eyes seeing, the nose smelling, the mouth tasting, the ears hearing, and actually our tactile sense is also processed in parts of the central nervous system, the head brain as well. So cognitive perception, in other words, taking information in, perceiving things, thinking, that analysis, that cognitive processing, the supercomputer power, if you like, is the head brain. And also making meaning. In other words, the story we tell ourselves. You may well have had clients who perhaps they have a limiting belief, perhaps they talk to themselves in a way that they wouldn't talk to somebody else. They may be more harsh to themselves in their internal dialogue or their self-narrative. That's about how we make meaning of things, what we tell ourselves about a situation. And of course, the thing is, it's not only our head listening to that story. Our heart and our gut are listening to that story as well. And consequently, they respond differently according to what story we tell ourselves. So if that's the jobs that the head brain is responsible for, then what about the heart brain? Given all the phrases that you came up with, all the song titles that you identified, all the gestures that you noticed, what are some of the main jobs of the heart?
Feeling.
Feeling, absolutely. Anything to do with emotions and feelings isn't, contrary to popular opinion, the job of the limbic structures in the head brain. Actually, the neurological electrical signaling is initiated by the heart brain. So emotions are a heart inside job. Fantastic, thank you. What else is a job of the heart? I think it was, go on.
Compassion.
Perspective.
Compassion, perspective, fantastic. Compassion is actually the highest expression of the heart brain. It's one of the fundamental foundations of humanity. So absolutely, we have a saying in mBraining, which is the heart leads, and that's not by accident either. I think it was Jan earlier on who put his hand on his heart, and a lady further down, Cecil, I think, put her hand on her heart, and they said something like, get to the heart of what's important. So in coaching terms, what's that about? What's that job?
Prioritizing.
Exactly. Thank you. It's about prioritizing, about putting things that are of most value above things that are of a lower value to us. So it turns out that valuing, prioritizing, and what's important is a job of the heart. That's why people's hands go there. We know that when a sports person or an athlete comes first in a particular event, or they score a goal, their hand goes straight to the logo or the emblem. And where is that on their jersey? It's just to the left, over where the heart is. And also, when people talk about what's important to them, they often use gestures like this. How could that be a job of the heart? What might that represent?
It's communication.
Yeah,
But
fantastic.
isn't it like awareness, consciousness, and awareness?
It's a part of our awareness and our consciousness, exactly. So communication is a function of being in relationship with another, whether that be family, friends, our boss, the company, and how we relate to the company. It's any form of relational affect. In other words, a feeling about how we are with other people, whether we belong or we feel excluded, all of those things. So the main jobs of the heart, just to echo what you've already said, are feelings and emotions, valuing, prioritizing, and connecting or relating. So you've now got the jobs of the head, the jobs of the heart, and of course, now we're going to be moving down, deeper down to the gut. So from the phrases that you identified to do with the gut brain, what are some of the main jobs of the gut, do you sense?
Perhaps judging.
I beg your pardon?
Judging.
Judging, fantastic. There is an element of judging because it's a case of, is this something for me, or am I going to reject this? So there's that element of, do I find this acceptable, or am I going to reject it and exclude it? You notice what I was doing with my hands there. If it's something that's coming towards me and is acceptable, I'll take it in, or I'll reject it and I'll exclude it. What's that about?
The word intuition comes to me, but
yeah, absolutely. It's how we surface our intuition. And particularly, we're able to surface intuition much more easily when we're aware of our boundaries and boundarying. What is mine and what is not mine? What am I able to accept and digest and take into me? And what am I going to reject as, no, that's not something for me. That's outside of my boundary. I'm rejecting that or keeping that outside. Yeah, excellent. And what about what is deeply who we are as humans? Have you ever heard any clients or coachees talk about who I am up high? It doesn't seem to sound
about
right, does it?
grounding.
Grounding, exactly so. When people are grounding, when they're coming into the present moment, when they're coming fully, deeply into themselves, they're coming into their own identity. And much of the work that we all do as coaches is to help people with those transitions of identity, perhaps from being a reportee to being a leader, new position, whether it's changing from being in an organization to being self-employed, whether it's from a transition from being in a relationship to being single, or to being a parent, or being retired. All of these transitions really speak to who we are deep down, our identity. So it turns out the gut is our seat of our identity, how we are, who we are. And also, you might have heard me say earlier on about taking gutsy action. So the gut, it turns out, is also about mobilization. It's about getting going. And you will know, you will have had some coaches potentially in the past who came up with great ideas. They cared a lot about it. They may have got quite emotional. But actually, if they didn't do something different or additional, they're unlikely to have got the results they wanted. And that's because the gut looks after mobilization. So maybe their gut wasn't fully on board with the ideas and plans they came up with and what their heart was suggesting they cared about. And also, coming back to boundarying, the gut is the source of self-preservation, protection, safety, security. There's a reason why our viscera are buried in our torso, because nature determined that we can actually do without a limb or 3 or 4, and we can still stay alive and lead a fulfilling life. However, actually, if we take a visceral injury, it's going to be life-threatening potentially, and we need to look after that. So, although these were identified through action research and cross-referenced and correlated with the neuroscience, we actually know that these correspond deeply to how we are as humans. And they correspond also with the neuroscience around the number of neurons in each of these particular sets of intelligences. More of which you find out about should you be interested either by reading the book or coming on the course, where you get a copy of the book anyway. So if this is how we're designed as humans, barring any physiological or congenital different ability or absence, then surely we're all fine. If we're born with all of these aligned, then what can get in the way? So you may have experienced either for yourself or in your coachees that one of these 5 conditions may get in the way for people. Either one center or intelligence is used a lot more than the others. So, for example, you may have a client, and I think a couple of people were referring to either doctors or academics or educationalists or engineers who may be perhaps coming from one of their particular brains predominantly. Now, it's not their fault. We're not blaming them. Society has really taught all of us. That's the important one. Or you may have had a client who came from their heart more than the other 2. And perhaps they could actually do with getting a little bit more insight, a few more facts, thinking it through and analyzing it, and also taking action. Or maybe they were gut dominant. Maybe one center overrides the others. Now, this is similar, but it presupposes that all of the intelligences are playing a role, but one of them is shouting louder than the others. So perhaps it's actually influencing the others more so. Maybe one center or intelligence is used inappropriately to do another's job. So have you ever heard of anyone talking about comfort eating? So that's an example of where the gut is trying to do a job to suppress an uncomfortable emotion. It's saying, I don't want you to feel upset, heart. I'm just going to put a cream cake or a bar of chocolate on top of that to make all the nasty feelings go away, as an example. It might also be, I had an example of a client who She wanted to find a romantic relationship, and a particularly significant one. She wanted to find the love of her life. She'd done all sorts of things. She'd been speed dating, she'd gone online, she had gone on double dates with people. And I was asking her what else she'd tried, and really proudly, she got out her laptop and she showed me an Excel spreadsheet where she said, I've identified all of the criteria that the love of my life must fulfill, and I've actually ranked them in order of importance to me, and I've put a weighting behind all of them. And I had to share with her, that's a fantastic piece of work and it's useful, but you're actually not going to find the love of your life on an Excel spreadsheet. That's really your head trying to do the job of your heart. Maybe it's trying to protect it. There's a couple of examples of that one. Maybe one or more are in conflict, and you might have experienced one of your coachees or more who said they felt torn, and they might have used that sort of body language from one hand to another and said, I know that this is the choice that makes sense. I should take this job, but I don't want it. I don't feel comfortable with that particular level of responsibility or whatever it may be. That could indicate maybe the head and the heart in that example are in conflict. Or maybe all of the intelligences are present. They're all working together nicely. They're playing happily, but maybe they're used in the wrong order. In other words, an order that doesn't lead to harmony and alignment and results for that particular person. The key thing is in mBIT, we teach not only techniques to be able to calibrate which of these is going on for my client in all likelihood, but also how to help them beyond that, how to help them resolve that so that they can come to congruence or alignment. Now, a couple of you may have noticed I've used the term brain quite a lot. Now, this isn't actually a picture of my sister, but it might as well be. My older sister, although she's retired now, was a doctor, a family doctor for her whole career. And as we were growing up, she was the scientist. She knew she wanted to have a career in medicine, and she studied biology, physics, chemistry, and everything she needed to. I was more of the arts and humanities kid. I didn't really do very well in science until a few years ago it became fascinating. I was more into languages and anthropology and psychology, those sorts of things. And when I first did the mBIT coach certification course, I was suddenly gripped by science. It was the first time in my life that neuroscience made sense to me, because it was about helping me identify how people were working or what wasn't working for them. So I got a copy of the book, this book, and I gave it to my sister. And I said, go and read that and let me know what you think. And we got together about a month later for coffee. And to be fair, she'd read the book twice. And I was excited. And I said, what did you think of the book? Did you enjoy it? How did you find it? She said, yeah, there were some really excellent case studies in the book, some very good science behind it. I liked the author's voices. You could tell they were explaining it really clearly, but very accurately. And actually the theory and the framework behind it, I think, makes sense. She said, I got a bit hung up on the fact they kept referring to the heart and the gut as brains. Now, because I needed to help her overcome her only objection, I thought on my feet and I said, of course not. The heart and the gut are complex and adaptive functional and structural neural networks. She said, exactly. Why didn't they describe them as that? As soon as she knew that that was what the heart and the gut were, she was fine, and she accepted the whole premise of mBIT and mBraining. And in actual fact, she's studied it since. And in fact, complex and adaptive functional and structural neural network is the neuroscientist definition for what constitutes a brain. So again, it wasn't Grant or Marvin or me or any of us in the field of mBraining calling the heart and the gut brains. It's neuroscientists. But that said, if you don't feel comfortable calling them that, you could call them the complex and adaptive functional structural neural network, or just a neural network, or an intelligence, or a center, the heart center, or the gut intelligence, or the soul. Some of you may have a belief system around chakras. Really call them whatever you like, as long as you know that it's the neuroscientists that regard them as networks, neural networks, brains. So I'd like to give you another very brief experience this time of connecting with your own multiple brains. So before we start, I'd like you just sitting comfortably where you are, ideally your shoulders broadly above your hips, sitting with your legs uncrossed and sitting comfortably. I'd like you to identify a situation, a small challenge, something that you can cope with, but perhaps it's as yet unresolved. Might be working with a particular client. It might be something in your personal life. You're not going to have to discuss it with anybody. You're going to keep it private to yourself. So identify a situation that isn't yet entirely satisfactory, or something that's a bit more of a challenge. And so you might feel comfortable doing it. I'm just going to close my eyes in case any of you want to close your eyes. Just go inside and be with that particular challenge or situation now. Notice how you feel about it, any emotions that are present. What are any thoughts you have around that? What's the story you're telling yourself around that? And just scan in, sense into your gut. Notice, are you holding any tension anywhere? Are you feeling you want to take any action, or are you hesitating? Is there any sense of how you do or don't connect with this at an identity level? Just notice how you are in relation to that situation or challenge. Okay, so we're going to do some breathing. Just put that to one side for a moment. I'm sure you can recall it in a moment when you want to. So you can see on screen there a sine wave, a smooth wave. And in a minute, we're going to do some balanced breathing. And by this, what I mean is, as you imagine a ball rolling up, you're going to breathe in fully to your diaphragm, not moving your shoulders, but just letting your tummy come out, breathing fully into your diaphragm. And then at the top of the breath, not holding it in, just letting it smoothly flow out. And as you breathe fully out, letting your diaphragm and tummy fall back inwards. And again, not holding your breath out or forcing, just smoothly breathing in and out. And the crucial thing is breathing in and out for the same duration. And generally in for a count of about 6 and out for about 6. Now, if for some of you that's too long, make it 4 and 4. That's fine. For some of you who are yogis, that might be too short. Make it 10 and 10. That's fine as well. The important thing is that it's even and easy. Effortless breathing. So let's just breathe in our own time and rate. Easily and evenly. Allowing the breath to flow. Maintaining both calm and alert. This is different to relaxation breathing because you're also fully aware of your surroundings, of my voice, any other sounds you can hear. Just keep your rhythm. easily and evenly, both in and out. As you breathe, you might even want to place a hand on your heart and a hand on your tummy. Just becoming aware of the balanced breathing flowing. Taking time to just breathe. And as you continue breathing, you're asking your heart, in relation to this situation or challenge, what's truly important to you? And trust that your heart will find a way of communicating what's important. Maybe through a symbol or a word or a picture or an emotion. And as you carry on breathing, ask your head if there's any information that you're missing, that you need in order to resolve this. What do you really know about it? And as you carry on breathing, ask your gut what it deeply needs in order to either act on this or let go. And just notice what arises or bubbles up as you carry on breathing. And of course, as we come back into the room, as it were, please carry on breathing. It's useful for us as humans. You don't have to continue balanced breathing, although that in itself would be useful. But just do a quick check inside and notice in relation to that situation or challenge that you first thought of. Do a scan, sense in. How do you relate to it now, perhaps slightly differently? If you were to describe that to yourself, how is it different? Just do a quick check of that for yourself. For your background awareness, you did 2 minutes of balanced breathing, 2.5 minutes only. And our colleagues in HeartMath has done research that actually demonstrates that just 2.5 minutes of balanced breathing, regardless of what the count is, it's the rhythm that counts, actually can allow up to 12 hours of autonomic nervous system coherence. In other words, coming from that neutral, not so busy and running around, really stressed and overstimulated in the way that our world often gets us. But by the same token, not in an altered state, as in hypnosis or relaxation that we're so laid back we don't care. It's actually about coming from coherence, this neutral, expansive place in the middle that enables us to communicate clearly and gain that wisdom from our heart, our head, and our gut. So notice what might be present with you now. So as we draw towards the close of the presentation, a couple of things I'll share with you, and I'll be around for questions towards the end. In terms of references, I've already shared with you the book. As I mentioned, you can buy it on Amazon and other booksellers, but you do get a copy free if you sign up for the mBIT course, which is 4 days. mbraining.com is the main website where you can find lots of additional resources should you wish to. And there's a blog which you'll be able to pick up from the recording, Grant Suslu's blogs on all sorts of subjects. One of the things we focus on in mBraining, which is a form of ontological coaching, is you are more than a human being, you're a human becoming. Neurologically speaking, we are neurally plastic. We are continuously wiring and rewiring. The more bizarre thing would be if we thought the same, felt the same, or did the same as we did a couple of years ago, because we're constantly in the process of updating. So really, from me, thank you so much. Keep making an awesome difference in the world, as I know you already do. Before I end the presentation, just to let you know that, as Lars mentioned, there is an ICF accreditation for the mBIT Coach Certification course. The next time I'll be running this in your neck of the woods will be in Stockholm next month, October the 11th to the 17th. Is it the 11th to the 17th or the 11th to... I'll clarify the dates afterwards. I think it might be the 11th to the 14th. Apologies for that. There are 31.75 CCEs or CCEU, 17.25 of those are CCE specific, and 14.5 of those are resource development specific. I know that as ICF members, that may be particularly important to you, particularly those of you that are going for recredentialing. I'd be delighted if any of you would like to connect with me outside of this webinar. So on Facebook or LinkedIn, just look up my name. You should be able to find me easily enough. And there's my email address as well, reb@revealsolutions.co.uk. So I'm going to end the presentation there. I'm really happy to stick around for questions, for comments, for input, for discussions. And I believe that either Lars or Dennis are going to put in the chat. There is a link there if you're interested in finding out more. Obviously, no obligation. I don't do pressure selling or anything like that. You can find out more by following the link that's been put in the chat there. And really just to encourage you to explore. We're a growing community globally. We're in 39 countries now. There are approximately 3,300 certified mBIT coaches across the world, across 5 continents now. The book is translated into a number of languages, not quite yet Swedish, but that will be coming potentially in the future. Certified mBIT coaches have access to a growing research base, not only in neuroscience, but also people can really tune into that cutting edge as things are continually updated. People who become certified coaches can either combine that with the rest of their, well, can always combine it with the rest of their existing modalities and skill set. We have people who are also counselors, psychotherapists who combine it with their work. We have people who are certified mBIT coaches who are doctors, who are university lecturers, high school teachers, chief executives of a number of well-known blue chip companies across Europe and across the world. So really from all sorts of walks of life. So really ask any questions that you like. The certification planned for Stockholm is aiming to go ahead next month. Of course, it will depend on numbers. We need a minimum number to make it a really rich and invigorating course so everyone gains a good experience. We work relatively content-free on the course. So for anybody who has a bit of a concern around it being delivered in English, actually, when people go and do their practice in pairs, you can do that in Swedish if you prefer, or any other language for that matter. So don't worry so much about that. I'm used to working in other countries where English isn't the first language. So I'll stop the share now and I'll hang around for any questions. And I believe that either Lars or Dennis may also have some things that they want to ask or say. But from me, thank you.
So the time is, we have used our time, but still, do any person have any questions? We give room for that.
Hi, Lars. This is Gunilla Julin. I have a question. Do you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, great. It was a super interesting session, and one question that was sort of popping up in my head: how much does this whole theory and concept has to do with age? You talk about wisdom, experience, going to the gut, etc. I mean, a younger person versus an older person. Would that affect the ability to combine these brains, or can you say something about that? Thank you.
I absolutely can. What a fantastic question, Leila. We do have the youngest certified mBIT coach so far, I believe, was 15 years old. And the oldest that I'm aware of, not on certification, but the oldest living is towards the end of their 80s. And the thing about wisdom is it's innate and it's unique and it changes and evolves over time. So there are plenty of mBIT coaches who are working in younger age education and particularly teaching children how to tap into their own wisdom. So can you imagine if primary school age children were encouraged and taught how to connect with their heart, with what's truly important for them, with what people they feel connected to and what emotions are for them, then perhaps we would have a generation of much more emotionally intelligent adults when they've had a few years under their belt. So children do this quite naturally, actually, when they're given the tools. That said, it's also used in corporate world very conversationally, and it may take adults, particularly if they've been living in their head quite a bit, may take them a little bit longer to connect with their heart or with their gut. But actually, with the right coaches like you and with the right guidance, and I genuinely mean this, in the last 10 years that I've been predominantly using mBraining as my means of coaching, consulting, supervising, and also the training that I carry out, I have yet to meet a person for whom mBraining doesn't work profoundly and successfully. I haven't met anyone of any age. My youngest coachee has been 10. They're now 11, but they were 10 when I was coaching them. And my oldest has been in their early 80s. So across all ages, it's incredible.
Good. Thank you so much. I was just thinking of the word wisdom. You see someone who's gray hair on their height of their lifespan.
Yeah.
And that's the only ones who can go on their gut feeling. But thanks for clarifying.
Oh, you're welcome. And it may be that, just speaking personally, the older we get, maybe we actually care less about what society says, and maybe we are more encouraged to tune into our own innate wisdom. Maybe that's why older people are perceived as wiser. I'd like to think so anyway.
Yeah, thanks.
You're welcome.
We're talking about headquarters and who is working there and so. And I saw a picture in myself with a lot of men with ties strangling, hitting the head from the body. And what we now see that the tie is not so important any longer. It seems like it's. The question is do you see a trend that we are more and more integrating head, heart, out from the symbol, taking the tie away? Let the flow come in?
Yeah, what a fantastic question, Lars. Thank you. So I'm a dyed-in-the-wool optimist. So I like to think that there is a trend. Now, we all know that about 3.5 years ago, the world had a bit of a pattern interrupt, and many things suddenly became possible within a week or two that had been deemed impossible, including people working remotely, including Zoom that's bringing this to us this evening. And think that's actually caused us culturally to start questioning, and personally to start questioning a lot more things, including received wisdom, that it has to only be about making sense, facts and figures, etc. Certainly, I also think generations, if we look at Generation Z, post-millennials, they have a different set of priorities. They are generally, and of course it is a generalization, much more values focused, much more values led. When choosing a career, for example, they'll care more about what's my work-life balance and what are the people like I get to work with, and what's the ethics and the social responsibility of the organization I work for, rather than only what's the pay package and what size desk do I get. Now, that's a huge generalization, but I would love to imagine that that is because they are innately connecting with their heart and their gut as much as using their heads as well.
Maybe we shall close. People are, it's still 22 persons here. But thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you, Rev, for sharing your knowledge. We need to expand our thoughts. We also need to go deeper in some issues. And I think it was very valuable for coaches to have this, see the differences with these different brain systems. And so thank you very much.
You're so welcome.
Thank you all. That was